This is the first time Maggie's has hosted its own Zoom webinar as opposed to participating in them. So I'm afraid you may have to just tolerate my slight jitteriness on managing the logistics of this. I'd like to start to say by a very huge welcome. It is fantastic of so many of you, our trusts and foundation supporters of Maggie's, to join us today. And I'm so pleased that you are joining to hear a bit more about how Maggie's has come through the last year, down to the fact that you have been extraordinary in your support and backing of our work. I know many of you have supported us over the long term, but last year, of course, for all of us, it was none like any before. And to have had your friendship and backing and support has meant so much to Maggie's. And it's with that as we go on to talk to you about this year and the year ahead, what you're going to be able to help us achieve. So thank you for partnering with us, and thank you for joining us today. I hope you find this session informative. We have a panel of folks from Maggie's, including myself. We have Leslie Howell, who's our lead psychologist, who will be speaking and sharing a film. Karen Verrill, who's our centre head from Newcastle, who will also be speaking. And we've got two short films from our centre in Oldham that Trish is speaking to you as a centre head, and Tara from our centre in Swansea. And then we'll be joined at the end with our fundraising director, Sharon Malone, who will form part of this four-man panel. And what I hope is, and this is where Cassie, who many of you know is our head of trust, has given me the tough job of chairing this session, is I hope that we can have enough time at the end to be able to have an open question and answer session. Before I go further, I'd like to just ask if you would like to just, over this openings moment, is just use the chat session to introduce yourself, to say where you're from, and just to sort of let us know that we're not alone in this webinar. As many of you know, and I've had the great pleasure of meeting many of you who've joined us today, I'd just like to kind of, Tom, I know you're joining from Saccone. I'd like to just know that the Steve Morgan Foundation is with us, and you've been amazing, extraordinary friends. The Vardy Foundation. It's wonderful to have you here, and I hope that if we carry on doing this, then maybe we will find a way of doing it in person next time. So lovely to have you all sort of sharing where you are in the chat. As you know, I've been at Maggie's from the very beginning, and as sort of chief executive, we now have 24 centres across the UK. And we were able to open the 24th centre at the beginning of this year in Southampton, thanks to lots of support from many trusts. And so we were able to complete the construction during the pandemic. And wonderfully, it's now got its doors, our 24th centre, sort of open. Before I sort of talk to you a little bit more about the kind of cancer landscape and the sort of Maggie's landscape, I wonder if I could ask you to participate in a poll. We would just like you to answer a simple question about whether or not you have visited Maggie's Centre before. So if I'm just going to pause for a minute and let you answer this poll, and it's a yes or a no. And I think you know what's coming. Is that the end of the poll? So the results show that 42% of you who have joined us have not visited a Maggie's Centre. Well, I'm sure those of you who have will shout out to your fellow trust colleagues and tell them that they have to come and visit. And you'd be most welcome to do so. We'd be delighted to show you around and let you experience the centre. And I know that we've got the brilliant Chris Weir, who supported Maggie's over a number of years. She's one of my first visits, coming to visit the Edinburgh Centre in June. So you're really welcome to see and experience Maggie's firsthand that your support helps achieve. As you know, with COVID, everything was turned upside down for everyone's lives, but I just want to sort of touch on what the impact has been specifically for the cancer community and how that's impacted on Maggie's. In the first 3 months of last year, when we went into the lockdown, all cancer screening was stopped. And at the same time, a Department of Health initiative was passed where all palliative chemotherapy was cesated at the beginning of the lockdown. So that meant that many people went into difficult situations where they didn't know that at the end of the lockdown whether or not they would be well enough to be able to restart chemotherapy. And of course, many people lost someone to cancer as a result of not being able to continue with their chemotherapy. And so that meant that when we were able to reopen our doors from the end of the first lockdown, that we had started to see people who'd had very difficult situations caused because of that initial response to COVID. We also then saw over the summer, due to the cessation of the screening, people not coming through for the cancer and not attending their GP. And then those that were beginning to come through the system were presenting with more advanced disease. And what we've seen in our centres from the end of the summer onwards is an uplift of over 20% of those coming through our doors with stage 4 cancers, which means that rather than coming with a cancer diagnosis that has the potential to be cured, they're presenting with a cancer diagnosis that can no longer be cured. And so that means that the level of intensity and anger and emotion for the person with cancer and their family has been enormous, and obviously what that has meant for Maggie's staff. That has also been compounded by relatives not being able to participate in the care of their loved one, and also being able to visit the hospital or talk to the clinical teams and understand what's going on. And they felt very isolated and alone in that journey. And as we know, this last lockdown has been also very severe, with lack of diagnostic theatre space available, lack of space for operating on cancers. We know that 1 in 3 people have had to have their cancer treatment altered or severely delayed. And again, that's having a knock-on effect in terms of their survivorship rate. And we know that the collateral damage of coming out of COVID, cancer is going to continue to be affected by for many months and years to come. And when we speak to some clinicians and some clinical teams, some people think that it could take us 10 to 15 years to get back to 2019 survivorship rates. So quite a profound impact during this year of COVID, but of course we're going to live with that compounded impact for people with cancer going forward. I think the positive news is that Maggie's have kept its doors open. So although we closed very initially, we started to do some bespoke work, and Karen will share a little bit more about what she's done in the Newcastle Centre of helping families come together. But we also started very early on to do some face-to-face work. Although we moved all of our activities to FaceTime, Zoom, Teams, and that using those digital channels to deliver support, what people said to us and what they asked for was the need to be seen. So we did that very carefully, following all the protocols. And when we have done our audit of our care this year with our centre visitors, they have unanimously said that the face-to-face work is crucial and so important to the support that Maggie's has given them. That said, we've learned a lot about offering and continuing to support people who can't perhaps travel to Maggie's or to reach us. And we've been able to also reach more people who wouldn't perhaps have been able to get to Maggie's as well. So there's been much learning, but we've been able to stay open throughout, and we've been able to support the needs of people with cancer whilst recognising that those needs have shifted and are of an intense level. we do at the end have this Q&A session where I think that's when I would like to bring us all back together and answer kind of sort of more detailed questions that you might have on the impact of cancer and how Maggie's has responded. So as we move into this next session where Karen is going to speak to you, we are going to close the chat session, if that is right, Cassie. And we will come back as we've ended the sessions to then opening with the Q&A. So I'd now like to hand over to my colleague, Karen Verrill, who runs the Newcastle Centre. Karen, over to you.
Thank you, Laura. As Laura's kind of alluded to, during the last year, we've all had to learn to live with uncertainty. I'm sure you don't need me to tell you that, and adapt to new ways of living and working. People with cancer were already living with uncertainty, and the pandemic compounded this, and the people with cancer have suffered more than ever. There's been practical difficulties accessing services, which have led to delays in diagnosis, delayed, suspended, cancelled surgery and treatments, fewer available scans, so longer waits for people, and fewer face-to-face interactions with cancer teams, which has led to heightened uncertainty, anxiety, fear from patients and their families. Those who've been able to go ahead with treatments have mostly had to attend appointments alone. I'd like to introduce a short video to you from a family who used the centre during the lockdown.
Before Kim's diagnosis, we were just obviously getting on as everyone does, you know what I mean? Work commitments, out with the family all the time. She knew something's not right, so she was going to her own doctors. I mean, he was trying on different antibiotics and that, you know, but it just wasn't going away. They didn't actually know what they were dealing with. Then obviously Kim and myself, you know, we didn't know if it was rare, you know, how long it is, what's the survival rate, we didn't know anything, you know. It was uncertainty of like, am I going to be able to cope, do you know what I mean, on my own? Which is a lot, you know what I mean, I think. An uncertainty of like, the pandemic itself, you know, is an operation going to go ahead with the pandemic that's on? Luckily it did. It's like really intense chemotherapy, so it's going to be inpatient. You know, I would drop Kim off and she would go missing for 2 days, so the kids didn't know where, well, Mum was, you know. It put a lot of upset at home with the kids, you know what I mean, behaviour problems or, you know, obviously crying for the mum, you know. But the centre itself's been a massive help, especially for Kim, because she's over there on there for 7 days. And she looks forward to coming over here on the Wednesday. It's a little escape from the ward, you know, it was just nice all to still be a family together. The kids look forward to coming here. Give the sweets back before they eat them all. Well, I've been a bit down, but obviously I'm not going to say nothing to Kim because she's obviously got her own worries, but obviously there's a few times I've spoke to Karen, you know, and she's offered me help and advice or whatever I need, you know, so it's nice to have that emotional support. The centre itself, I can't thank them enough, do you know what I mean, for like totally being there for whatever we need, and not just for us, for everyone. I don't know how we would have managed really if it wasn't for the centre being here during the pandemic. I don't know what we'd have done.
Thank you to Steve and his family, and we're so pleased to have been there for Steve, Kim and the twins. Unfortunately and sadly, their story is one of many we've been hearing, like all of our centres. And young families have been under immense pressure during lockdown. There's been no relief for the parents suffering from cancer in the way of having no grandparents on hand to help, isolation from extended family support, no sleepovers for children. The schools closed, so the children at home with no privacy for the parents to talk, to cry, to share the sadness and grief that is associated with having cancer, and them being basically unable to let their guard down as they needed to keep up an act to protect their children. Children have watched their parents deteriorate physically and mentally because of having cancer in the midst of a coronavirus pandemic. And families have been unable to make the kind of memories they would have done. And for some of these, it's been in the last year of their lives. So that has been particularly tough on young families. There's been fear and heartbreak for people ill in hospital and in the community, again, apart and isolated from their families and friends, being given bad news with no family present, and people unable to have loved ones with them until they were literally a few hours from dying. And, you know, what is right about that? It's been absolutely terrible for people. And the uncertainty around the whole experience is just, has been huge. We've actually supported some of these families to have visits in the centre, which has been extremely rewarding and very well received, but obviously very sad to see as well, but in a lovely environment. Many of the local support services and organisations haven't been able to deliver their usual care and support, particularly face-to-face, and Maggie's has been there for people who need us. I personally have been a qualified nurse for several decades, I'm not going to tell you how many, and have never in all of these years seen such extreme psychological distress as I have in the last year. Totally unprecedented, and I've been quite shocked by the level of it. The complexity of the conversations we've had in the centres or over the phone, online, with people continues to increase, and is going to do for a long time as the effects of the pandemic on families affected by cancer become even more evident. We're working with these people and identifying their evolving needs. Living with uncertainty is now an extremely common theme, extending across all we do. We've observed, listened to our visitors, and as a result of this, we're further developing our already extensive programme of support. During lockdown, some of the centres had shielding support for people because that was all new. And again, isolation and uncertainty was very evident. And in Newcastle, we're piloting a 6-week living with uncertainty course to help people with the additional challenges they're now facing. This will involve strengthening the resilience to cope with stress and tolerate uncertainty. They'll be with others, they'll share experiences, they'll get mutual support and also professional guidance. I think, well, I know coronavirus has been catastrophic for many people with cancer and their families, and it's wreaked unprecedented trauma and devastation on many. We at Maggie's are with them, we're here for them and physically present. Cancer hasn't stopped because of coronavirus. Thank you, and over to Laura.
Thank you so much, Karen. Karen, I think your story is just, as we know, the impact of Maggie's has been profound, and I know it's been a tough and challenging time for our staff, but I think because of your expertise in the field of cancer, you've done a brilliant job of supporting not only the people going through cancer, but our NHS colleagues. And I think that's one of the outcomes of the last year, is our relationship with the NHS has strengthened as they've recognised the skills and expertise that Maggie's has to support people with intense trauma, with profound grief that is been exacerbated because of the impact of COVID. So thank you, Karen, and thanks to Steve for sharing his story. I just had a look in the chat area, and there's so many friends that have joined. Karen from the Hollywood Trust, lovely to see you. Hugh from the Bradbury Trust. Hugh, thank you for helping us meet the Southampton Centre, and Ruth from the Steve Morgan, and many more of you, really welcome. I mentioned about the Q&A being available at the end. It's now open, so if you've got a question as we're going through this, feel free to post it, and then we'll come back to and look at all the questions as we come through. One of the things that I did over this period was I talked to the all-parliamentary group that was looking at the impact of COVID, and in a sense trying to assess some of the collateral damage of some of the decisions that we've made. And I hope I was able to do justice to expressing the impact that, for all good reasons, of how the cancer community has been affected. I'd now like to move to telling you about another area of Maggie's work, which is about our benefits and financial support, which many of you support us with. each of our centres has a benefits advisor who not only helps with people's access to benefits, but also helps with those complex debt management, societal immigration, loss of housing, and those sort of complex areas. And at a point when many services went completely digital. What we were told is that because people could still come in and see our benefits advisors, this was crucial because people often, as Karen mentioned, within families did not have a private space within their home or the technical machinery within which to do this work virtually, or the verbal or communication skills to do it over the phone. So let me now hand over to this film that Trish from our Oldham Centre has made.
Oldham has high levels of deprivation and poverty. This is not uncommon for many areas in the UK, and the inequalities are getting worse rather than better. We know that if you come from a poorer background, you're more likely to have higher cancer risk factors such as smoking and obesity. You're also less likely to take up cancer screening. And it's not only this, survival rates are much worse for those who are most deprived. Every year, more than 30,000 extra cases of cancer in the UK are directly caused by inequality. The evidence is clear. The most deprived populations have higher risk of cancer, worse experiences and poorer outcomes. The poorer outcomes that we see at Maggie's Oldham have been made much worse by the coronavirus pandemic. Recent pauses in screening and treatment have meant that more than 650,000 people with cancer in the UK have experienced disruption to their treatment or care. And people are being diagnosed later with awful consequences. In Oldham, a study of people aged between 50 and 64 over the last 6 months showed a 20% increase in people having advanced cancer. It has been an extremely difficult year for people with cancer, but Maggie's have been here with them. Last year, our team in Oldham provided 6,000 sessions of cancer support with our cancer support specialists, psychologists, and benefits advisor. The people we saw had highly complex emotional challenges, and our team spent longer with them than in previous years. Many had received news that their cancer was incurable due to delays in screening, diagnosis and treatment. At Maggie's Oldham, we see a lot of people who are extremely worried about the impact of cancer and coronavirus on their finances. Alan has had a difficult past with little family support and losing a son many years ago.
I met Jean on Oldham Market when I think I was about 17-year-old. We got married. Jean got diagnosed with melanoma skin cancer, and it just started spreading, you know.
In May 2020, Alan advised us that Jean had passed away. He was financially struggling and wasn't receiving any money. Geraldine was able to get his credit backdated and an urgent funeral payment to help pay for the funeral.
For the benefit side of it, you know, the attendance allowance, and I was actually caring for her, so she got me some carer allowance as well, you know.
For many people, the stress of the financial impact of cancer is worse than the cancer itself. Even before coronavirus, 83% of the population found that they were around £600 worse off every month due to a cancer diagnosis.
It wasn't easy at all. It was terrible, actually.
Many people are surprised that a cancer diagnosis has such an impact on finances, but it can limit your ability to earn money, cause spiralling bills. It means spending more time at hospital or at home, and leads to higher transport bills due to trips to the hospital for treatment. People are struggling financially more than ever. Last year, our benefits advisor Geraldine was incredibly busy, helping people claim benefits they were entitled to and explaining the impact of furloughing.
You felt like you were getting help to you, you know what I mean? They were doing something for you, you know, which which nobody else has basically done, you know.
During 2020, Geraldine supported visitors 1,700 times and brought in more than £1.7 million in financial gains.
Well, first of all, she's a friendly person, you know. She's nice to talk to, you know. And I told her what my problems were, and she sorted them out, let's put it that way.
From working with local authorities to finding housing for the homeless who are going through treatment, to helping people who can't afford a loaf of bread to access one-off grants, to supporting people to access universal credit, help with pensions. The cases Geraldine sees at Maggie's Oldham are hugely complex and varying, but they allow people to worry less about their finances so they can focus on their health.
It's just breaking the ice, coming through the door, innit? Once you're through the door, and like I say, everybody's as friendly as anything. That's all you need.
Here at Maggie's Oldham, we offer support to anyone living with cancer, and that support is needed more than ever before. Our teams are here for people at any stage of their cancer diagnosis. Our benefits advisor help people pay their bills, put food on the table, and keep a roof over their heads, giving them one less thing to worry about. From all of us at Maggie's, thank you for supporting us.
Thank you, Trish. Last year at Maggie's, we were able to raise £37 million worth of grants and entitlements to support people who used our Maggie Centre. So a really important and vital bit of our work. The next film that I'm going to share with you is from Dr. Victoria Hammer. She's a consultant nurse in breast cancer care at Imperial College. And as I mentioned earlier, our relationship with the NHS is critical. It's one of the best ways that we know that Maggie's can help people with cancer and their family and friends if we work closely with our NHS colleagues and they understand our contribution and how we can work alongside them. Let's move to the film by Victoria, and she can explain how she sees it from the NHS's perspective.
I'm Dr. Victoria Harmer, consultant nurse in breast care at Imperial College Healthcare NHS in London. I lead the nursing team within breast screening and symptomatic services. Working as an oncology nurse at Charing Cross Hospital, I see firsthand every day how difficult this pandemic has been for people with cancer. I work within a fantastic medical team delivering excellent care and treatment for people with cancer. But often they need more than medical care. That's why my colleagues and I feel incredibly lucky to have a Maggie's here within the hospital grounds. I know that throughout the pandemic, Sinead, the centre head, and her team at Maggie's West London have been providing brilliant support to people with cancer and their families and friends. The team at Maggie's work tirelessly with appropriate passion and measured application. The place is a safe environment for people not to be okay. People can muddle through life. Maggie's help people untangle life and other issues they may have in order to concentrate on the physical. We are so lucky to be in this partnership with Maggie's. We sort out the body and Maggie's sort out the mind. Maggie's have an evolving service, adjusting to life with the pandemic and what may come, dovetailing support services for the patient and their friends and family. Maggie's has been excellent for patients that we refer here, both with early breast cancer and also if they were diagnosed with metastatic, life-limiting disease. Only yesterday, a patient reported back how nurtured, nourished and supported she felt after her time at Maggie's. She's a young woman with breast cancer and a complicated family structure, and being at Maggie's enabled her to concentrate on herself and her issues and priorities in order to be able to cope with the next phase of treatment. NHS colleagues like me work closely with staff at all 24 Maggie's centres across the country. By working together, we can ensure that people with cancer get the support they need.
Thank you, Victoria. Just a reminder that the Q&A session is open if you want to ask any questions, and we'll come back to that towards the end. I'd now like to hand over to my colleague, Leslie Howells, who's the lead psychologist at Maggie's. As you know, many of you are very interested, and quite rightly so, on the impact of Maggie's and how we go about auditing and research and evaluating our work. Leslie's going to take you through some of the evidence that we have of the peer-to-peer support group that we have in Edinburgh, a men's group there. Leslie, over to you, please.
Hello, everybody, and thank you so much. Thank you so much, Laura. I'm going to share my screen. Just a simple slide to illustrate what I want to offer over to you today. So I'm just going to get that up for you. Won't be a second. There we go. Okay, so let me tell you about our groups, but then expanding on the groups in terms of some of the research that we've been doing around groups recently. Just as an example, our research goes right the way across the programme, and this was just a neat way of actually capturing some of the things that have been happening in the way that we bring people together, and also the outcomes that we've been finding. So one of the things that we all know is that hearing the story of another person similar to you is one of the most powerful ways of building the confidence you need to take on the challenges that cancer can bring. And research demonstrates this, and also we see it every day in our Maggie's groups. And I'd like to introduce you to some of the men who are part of the Edinburgh men's group to tell it in their own words. So we're moving over to the film now. I'll just stop sharing my screen.
Maggie's has brought this group of guys together, the complete strangers.
That afternoon, I would almost say, was a life-changing moment for me, because we all felt the same at the very same time, and you could see everybody's faces.
I kind of now feel more at ease with the thought of cancer and with the thought of the surgery I've been through.
I mean, we sometimes worry when we're at the Maggie Centre that we're going to get thrown out because there's so much hilarious laughter comes out of the room. Sometimes, you know, we go into hysterics about the most ridiculous things, you know.
These guys have helped me. They have no idea how much they've helped me. So, guys, don't start crying, please, because I know you can.
So you can't really say it better than in the words of the guys who visit us. So let me expand on this, again, just using this slide as an anchor. So one of the things you'll have recognised there is very much that our groups are a way in which people can find people who truly understand. They share the same story or a very, very similar one. There's no need to kind of edit what you've got to say. There's no need to put on a face. It's a safe place to speak. And people will talk about in research, and also every day within our centres we hear it. There's a way that that group forms a trusted space around them where they can find the confidence to actually put some of their worst fears into words. And over the last year, this has become even more evident, that just the importance of that group, when suddenly people found that they couldn't actually meet those people in person initially, but very, very swiftly we moved online, very much at the behest of our group members, as they wanted to connect again in these times where not only their worlds were being upended, but those around them. Because we all know, as human beings, seldom do we want to feel alone. We may wish to be alone sometimes, but we don't want to find ourselves there without any choice. It's a deep human wish to connect and be present with others, and sometimes without words. That connection is fundamental to being a human being. And I know that the evolutional psychologists and biologists will tell us this, and COVID restrictions really amplified it for everyone. But many of our group participants will say that they just couldn't get through the stress of not just COVID, but the stress of cancer, had it not been for the bonds that they've made within the groups of these trusted individuals. And one of the things that we also are aware of is the way that people will look to the group for that simple space to actually be sad, be joyful, be elated, be anxious, but also not again have to edit their words or their emotions. And some of the research that we've done has really shown that kindness, honesty, acceptance are some of the core values that underpin our group. And indeed, right across the spectrum of our programme, people say that these core values, kindness, honesty, acceptance, are the things which really help their group work for them. So let me just finish really by talking more about this particular study that we've been doing with the Edinburgh University Business School. And it expands beyond Edinburgh and encompasses up to 213 men who filled in a survey and 19 guys who were interviewed and 7 who took part in a focus group. And you won't be surprised that what they said was, bring us together. When you bring us together, and it can be an informal gathering, it can be around a task, it can be to do with gardening, it can do walking, mindfulness, creative writing, or it can be to do with a cancer-specific conversation. When you bring us together, we're there. What motivates us to be there is the fact that we can help each other. We can gain information firsthand from other people who truly get it. But also, one of the things that they say is that not only when you bring us together, not only do you help us to share information, but you have a dramatic impact on our well-being. So not just psychological well-being as a kind of all-encompassing term, but actually well-being around what's meaningful in life, well-being around what's socially, what's important, what important and matters to me in terms of relationships. And the men will say that coming together in groups helps them to rehearse how they can speak to the people alongside them, their family, their friends, and also their employers. But also the men in the wellbeing study told us about how important these groups were in terms of helping them feel confident about their future and finding meaning and hope, even though their time might be very short, and live well with uncertainty and change. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Leslie. I think it's, as you know, one of the key gifts of Maggie's centres and the works of our centres is the capacity to offer that peer-to-peer support. I'd like to move to our final film of the day, and before we come back to the Q&A session, and this is from Tara, who is the centre head in our Swansea Centre, who's going to talk to you about the impact of cancer in the family. So here's a film from Swansea.
When someone is diagnosed with cancer, the impact is felt all around them. Their families and friends go through it too, and we know that children can find it especially hard. During the pandemic, families facing cancer have encountered extra challenges. They may have had to undergo treatment with no access to childcare, and that's particularly difficult for single-parent families. Many people with cancer have had to juggle homeschooling, work and hospital appointments all at once, and with no time off and being unable to rely on their usual support networks, such as friends and family, cancer can leave them feeling even more isolated. This can be felt throughout the whole family, and often it can be difficult to know how to best support younger family members. Maggie's has been there throughout, listening, reassuring and guiding. We've heard some devastating stories about children who are being bullied at school because mum or dad have cancer, or because someone close to them has died. For the teenagers who we support, we're hearing more than ever about difficulties managing their mental health due to someone close to them having cancer. We're currently supporting Mary and Devan, who've been having one-to-one counselling with our cancer support specialist. Both Mary and Devan were struggling with severe anxiety, depression, eating disorders and self-harming. In their own words, having the opportunity to talk in a safe space, and most importantly without feeling judged, has allowed them to work through these overwhelming feelings. It's not just direct support that we offer. Not all families will need one-to-one support. We've recently got to know Rian and his 7-year-old son Leon, who have been using the centre whilst Leon's dad has treatment. Leon loves the building and looks forward to his visit to the centre. On their last visit, Rian told me that any time his dad is getting ready to go to hospital, Leon will get excited and ask if today's a Maggie's day. For Leon and Rian, the environment and knowing that they can talk to us as and when they need is enough. There have been times during the pandemic when visitors were not allowed into the hospital. For some families, this meant children going weeks or longer without being able to see their parent or loved one. But we could help bring them together at Maggie's. BBC Children in Need featured one of our incredible families and told the story of Louisa and her dad Matthew, who were able to share precious moments and make lasting memories with Mum Lindsay before she died. Here at Maggie's in Swansea, we support the whole family, help that has been needed more than ever over the past year. We met Travis and his mum, and our children's counsellor Linda was able to help him and his sister move forward after their dad Ian died.
I was in a bad place. I was really angry, I was really sad, and it was just mixing. Like, I remember after he died, I got into like loads of fights in school. I was angry. I needed to get it out. I can't really talk to my mother because she was going through it as well. So I found it easier to talk to Linda. It just helps me get out my thoughts, and it's nice to have someone who understands. I'm less angry now, I'm less sad.
Your help and support mean we can carry on giving families like Travis's the support they need. Thank you.
Maggie's meant so much to me, so much to all of us. We were at our lowest and our darkest, and Maggie's was just like a bright light that just helped us get through what we've needed to get through, and still helps us now. An amazing place.
Thank you, Tara, for sharing those words and talking to all of you from our Trust and Foundations today. We're now going to move over to the Q&A session, and this is where I hope we can be sort of interactive, because you have many insights into the many charities that you support. So we've got much to learn from you, and obviously we want to answer your questions that you have about Maggie's itself. We will aim to finish at 2 o'clock, but at the end of this, there will be a short survey, because we'd love your feedback on the appropriateness of the content of this. Should we do it again? Do we look after you and support you in the right way and give you the right level of information? So if we go to the Q&A, and we have our panel with us, and we can then just decide who gets the trickiest of questions. So the first question we've got is from David Drummond. David, you've asked about that. You've tried several Zoom meetings through lockdown, but you found your members not so keen to because of the IT. I think if I'll answer this, and maybe Karen, you might just come in with it from your experience, because I think you've had a very positive engagement and experience with using the sort of digital channels. It's not been uniform across Maggie's. So we have had a variation across our centres from 80% of our work in our centres being face-to-face to 20% digital, to 80% digital and 20%. For example, the Glasgow community found digital channels just didn't want it, didn't have access to your pay-as-you-go phone, didn't have the capacity to support it with the technology and equipment and access to the internet. We also had to change some of the methods that we were using to deliver our relaxation stress management groups to be using Facebook, which is much more accessible than the likes of Zoom. But there were other communities where digital channels were hugely embraced. Karen, I don't know if you want to add anything into David's question.
Yeah, Laura, thank you. We also found that people were very, very glad of the digital platform. We set up quite a few Zoom support groups in the very beginning of lockdown, and found people were absolutely desperate, and so whatever means they could get to communicate with us and the team, they were glad to have. It went on for quite some time, and we still do have some support groups run over Zoom for those who, like you said earlier on, can't actually physically get to the centre, but we do have a lot more face-to-face contact, and that came as lockdown eased. Each time there was easing of restrictions, we found more people getting a bit tired of the digital and the Zoom, so wanted to come in, and then when the numbers rose, they were happy to revert back. So we've just adapted to whatever the numbers have been telling us. But we've had a lot of success with Zoom, and I had to learn very quickly because I'm very technophobic and old school, but I think it's a fantastic medium to use, but I think it varies, you know, for the people who are using it. And as I say, people started to really crave face-to-face support. So I think it's got a place, but, you know, alongside all of the rest.
Yeah. Thanks, Karen. I think I'm going to move to the third question that we've got there, which is, it's been a challenging time for people living with cancer, but have there been any positives over the last 12 months? And I think the digital channels is one of the positives, isn't it, Karen? I think what we have discovered at Maggie's is that actually we know that people want to come into our centres, and they've told us that they want that face-to-face time. But what we know going forward is that we can offer digital as a sort of blended way of supporting people. So if they happen to be in hospital and they still want to keep their psychologist appointment, or they're at home and they are not able to travel, they can still do that digitally. And so if they want to be able to join the yoga group, we can offer a hybrid yoga group that people can be in the centre and can still do it from home. So we think we've got lots of opportunities to keep a sort of blended programme and benefit from all of the learnings of digital. And I think that's what you're hearing from your visitors, Karen, isn't it?
Yes, we are. And I feel here, because we've had to incorporate more of the digital work, it's helped with social distancing, because it's meant people can come into the centre, those who can and who are not, you know, who want to, and we can still reach others as well via Zoom, and we'll continue with it. We have a lady who attends secondary breast cancer support group now, and she moved to Switzerland a couple of years ago and was unable to continue. But because of the Zoom support group, she now joins the group, and it's been a huge lifeline for her. I think we've also, because we've seen less physical people physically in the centre, we've been able to provide an even more bespoke, personalised, kind of individualised support offer programme to these people. And we've needed more time because of the more complex stories that we've been hearing because of treatment delays and disease progression. So having less people in the centre has helped us to offer the more complex support, but being able to reach the others who can't get in by Zoom is positive. And I think for us as an organisation, it's now given us the space to actually look very, very much at our programme and develop it. And it was, in my opinion, it was good anyway, but I think we're going forward having learned quite a bit, and we can develop this further than ever before. And I'm really, really excited about what else we are going to be able to offer.
Yeah, and I think there's been many other learnings. I think our working relationship with the NHS has been profound and will continue to benefit, I think, as a result of the pandemic. I think we have had, we've learned a lot about our donor communications and relationships. And I think one of the other sort of positives out of this is how we have worked to support our staff base. And I think, Leslie, I think one of the things that we've always been proud of, Maggie, is about how we support our staff. But I think our model of staff support, particularly as the work has been so grueling and intense. It has been crucial to the learnings, hasn't it?
I mean, one of the kind of key anchors within the week pre-COVID was the time where the staff came together to reflect on the emotional impact of the work they were doing, but also to exchange good practice and talk through how they can best be supporting the visitors coming through the doors. And what we did was we couldn't lose sight of that when we moved into the times of restriction. And what we did was we moved virtually at that time so that we still held that space during the week. And it was important not just also for the staff members, but also to make sure that we maintained that core priority for us, which is a good clinical governance, that we wanted to make sure that what we were offering in terms of support, even though we were having to do it in a more blended way and the complexity and the intensity was increasing, that we were still meeting people with the best quality of support that we possibly could. And I know that I mean, it's been gratifying seeing how that's just continued as an anchor. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, we wouldn't expect to have a meeting with Trust Foundations without a question about income. Sharon, there's sort of two questions here that both sort of come together. Carla Marshall has asked about how our charity income has been affected overall. And then linked to that is Ellie Sandercock has sort of asked a question about the perception of funders having diverted the resources to the COVID emergency, and what are our concerns for income in the medium term, and has this been our experience of Maggie's? I wonder if you could answer Carla and Ellie's questions.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. So I think we are still, so we've got our results for 2020, so our impact was, of course, affected quite significantly. So our, in comparison to 2019, I think we had a sort of reduction of about 7% across the board, and that was a success story for us, because I think at this point in time last year, we got busy with working out a range of scenarios which which were kind of like the worst case scenario to kind of best case, and actually where we ended was significantly better than we had hoped. I think that's not, there was a lot of movement within our income streams across the year, and just to the points around the kind of digital learnings, certainly that was the same for the income streams that we had as well. So we had to bring on some new things very quickly without kind of understanding them. And that was a good thing. We learned faster than we ever would have previously, because we just had to tackle it and get stuck in. But of course, we felt we had to prioritise funding our revenue streams in terms of keeping our centres open and healthy. So any of our capital work was kind of stalled during last year. And also we kind of wondered whether donors would have the appetite to build new buildings when actually the intensity of the pandemic and keeping services available was actually something that was front and foremost. And you've heard the stories and the experiences of people coming into the centres. So I think there was a big mix, and I think although we ended on I think in summary we probably ended the year in a better position, so down, significantly down, but in a better position than we thought we might. And I think that's largely due to some of the safety in our income mix, our income stream mix that existed anyway. So of course we didn't have to deal with having to close our retail arm because we don't have one. So we weren't as affected as maybe other people were in that respect. But I think also because, and it leads on to the second question, I think because particularly the people who are closest, the funders and supporters of Maggie's who are closest or understand Maggie's, really did actually, the loyalty and engagement that we have benefited from over a long period of time for some people who are with us this afternoon really did come to the fore. So one of the things that we did immediately was talk to all of our trust partners and ask people to to consider being flexible in terms of restrictions that had been already kind of agreed. And we were overwhelmed actually with the sense of you know, how people could do that and were willing to do that to help us through last year. And those conversations, of course, are ongoing. And then also we did very much benefit from that diversion of funds into sort of COVID survival or recovery as we have now, particularly from trusts and foundations, but also from our major donors and from some other supporters that we have in our funding mix. And I think that was the right thing to do for funders. We certainly benefited from that, but didn't look to kind of create anything different. You've heard about how we adapted and how we evolved, but certainly keeping our core offering and our core programme front and centre all the time, and just making sure that that was the strengths and the core of what we were doing. So I think there's a bit of a mix there, and I think what we realised as we went further through the year was that although April, May, June, the overwhelming in terms of funding uncertainty that we were dealing with then, you know, was fairly traumatic for everybody at the time. Actually, we've got through 2021, and the challenge now is we've got through 2020, and the challenge now is 2021 and 2022, because I think we have lost all of some of the opportunities that we've had for engagement across all of those, you know, all of the months last year. So I think we're working harder now than we ever had to kind of get back to a position and get ahead of building that all back. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, Sharon. I think, our priority at the start of the pandemic last year was how we could make sure that we kept all our centres open and operational with the right quality of resources. And thanks to your help, we've been able to do that and continue to do it. That doesn't mean to say that the projections in 2022 still feel, you know, uncertain, as we don't really understand the full impact of the economy and COVID. And of course, we will continue to ask for your support and backing and your learnings of how the world is looking, because we will obviously have to adapt as more information becomes apparent. I think that's our time up for the day. I would love to carry on talking and answering further questions, but I know how precious your time is. We've got this short survey that we'd just like to ask at the end. I would like you, if you've got any questions that we haven't answered, to come back and ask them. If there's anything that you would like to know more about Maggie's, anything that we can do to support our relationship and our work with you, please do so. For us, we're a relational organisation, so working in partnership with you is really important to us and something that we hugely value. So thank you very much for taking the time out to join us today, and look forward to meeting you all in person or again very soon. Thank you very much.